Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio, and this is the Idavox Report.
I would say 2 or 3 years, there's been, in historical terms, an absolute explosion of white racial consciousness, a rising determination of whites to defend their own interests. We have a chance, a fighting chance.
August 12th in Charlottesville, there's going to be a really amazing rally that was organized by someone who's here, Jason Kessler. And almost all of the alt-right is going to be there, and it is going to be hugely dramatic, probably hugely traumatic for the liberal people of Charlottesville.
And that was Richard Spencer from the National Policy Institute. A lot of people know him for getting, punched in the face in our intro.
That's the guy.
But that was from an excerpt of the documentary that we were both in called Alt-Right Age of Rage. It's on Netflix. It came out in 2018. And it was basically about more or less Trump's first year that culminated into Charlottesville. And as you can see, Richard Spencer was hyping up Charlottesville in the video 2 weeks before Charlottesville. So we wanted to start off the program, start off this podcast, this episode with that footage so you can understand why we need to talk about the fact that that conference that you just saw is going to happen again in November, on November 12th to the 14th at the Montgomery Bell Park Inn in Burns, Tennessee. It's about 45 minutes away from Nashville. But before we get into that, I want to say what's up to Brian Powers, Christian Perez, and attorney Will York, who was with us last week out of Tennessee. He has been involved with the fight against the American Renaissance for 8-9 years now. So we wanted him to come on and talk to us about what it is we've been fighting. We got a lot of information for you because we really, 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 and I mean really, need you to help us take this nonsense down. This is the 9th one they have had in this park, and Tennessee has been needing our help for years with this. For years. They've been building their numbers. We've been building our numbers, but we're getting pushed back from the states in some stupid ways, and that's why Will is.
Hold on, wait. You mean the state of Tennessee is helping you fight the Nazis, right? They're not.
Oh, you're so precious.
They don't want. I mean, they wouldn't want white supremacy. It's 2021. I mean, anybody standing up for Nazis this time has got to be a fucking idiot.
Well, when you consider that Don Sundquist, who was their governor a couple of years ago, was an associated of Council of Conservative Citizens, of which American Renaissance founder Jared Taylor was a board member of. Maybe not.
Put together,
I just gotta say the contrast. And I'm sorry I missed you last week, Will, but it was a great interview. And if our audience hasn't peeled back a week, go listen to last week's interview with Beth Foster. And Will.
2 weeks in a row with you guys. I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
You're the flavor of the month, Will we say.
Well, I'm glad you're back.
But I mean, the contrast from what we're hearing from the establishment, right? That we've got all this progress, and on, of course, the anniversary of George Floyd's murder. There's a lot of talk of all the progress we've made, and I agree. I don't want to take away. I agree there's progress made in some areas, but then I hear this fuck going on again, and I'm like, oh, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back,
Yeah, but before we go any further, we do have to acknowledge the fact that, yes, this is the first anniversary. This is the a year since George Floyd was murdered. This year since George Floyd was murdered, and it was with this that everybody started taking to the streets in one way or another. to address not only the concern of the fact that George Floyd was murdered, but also so many Black men, women, and children have been murdered over the past several decades, several generations, if you will, without anything happen by police, without anything happening to them, very little happening to them. And this is the this was a catalyst. This was the catalyst. I mean, yes, it was kind of like Mike Brown, or Eric Gardner, or even we may as well just throw in Trayvon. I mean, yeah, those sparked a lot of things. Freddie Gray in Baltimore, those sparked a lot of pushback. But this here hit differently. George Floyd hit differently, and I made the point when it happened last year that basically it was people videotaping, watching, and the videotape just shows people trying to tell the cops to pull off of his neck, trying to just basically say, you are killing this man. And that's all they could do for 9 damn minutes. And that just hurt. That just hurt too many people. So that's why things happen the way they do. Things are going to change. Things are going to change. May not happen in the necessarily within the government sphere, although a lot of people feel that that's the only way we can go about it. But trust me, it isn't. Things will change, much to Jared Taylor's chagrin.
And Daryle, I think that you're absolutely right, because what the George Floyd case represents really is the beginning of an institutionalization of change, where it's not just people in the street saying change, 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 but you saw in the trial of Derek Chauvin, the principal murderer of George Floyd, that blue wall of silence was completely demolished. So you had cop after cop after cop testifying against him rather than supporting him. And that is a real sea change, at least is what you typically see in a trial of a police officer, whether it's a civil case or certainly in a criminal case, where typically officers have each other's back. So there is something real there as far as an institutionalization of change.
I would add that in saying, if you look at even just the recent protests regarding the clash between Israel and Palestine, right? That the fact that people have come out en masse in favor of Palestine, I feel like that has very much piggybacked on the activism coming out of George Floyd. I think people are starting to make those connections, and they're starting to make those international connections. So, I mean, I feel like I would have been critical that there's been a change, but like I've seen it, right? I've seen it nationally. People that I like, friends and just acquaintances, loved ones that were not political, that have, I'd say they've been radicalized in the past year, but they've definitely become more aware of the current political situation in this country.
Yeah,
I would say we're better off.
I would say also in relation to what American Renaissance, we're talking about American Renaissance, and we do have to bring up the fact that, obviously they were talking about George Floyd as well this past year. And they wrote they had a weird article that they published called "What If George Floyd Had Been a White Man?" And they sit there and talk about how they were just basically actually just trying to use the same narrative that your mainstream conservatives were using in the wake of all of this, trying to say that that more whites were killed by the police than blacks, or Hispanics. But then they go on with saying that, blacks are responsible for most of the crime. So, I mean, one of the things they ended the article by saying, so what if George Floyd had been a white man? The most obvious answer is that Derek Chauvin would have treated him exactly as he treated Floyd. He would have gotten a statistic of another murdered by racist cop martyr. There have been thousands of white George Floyds. We just don't know their names. When white thugs overdose in police custody or shot during arrest, nobody seems to care. Or maybe society judges white people by the content of the character and not by the color of their skin. That disingenuous BS is why we're here today.
I mean, I would add that Black Lives Matter, first of all, like, it always cracks me up because it's people who don't know what Black Lives Matter is criticizing what they think Black Lives Matter should be doing. Right. And so right off the bat, Black Lives Matter, there's no like unified leadership. It's non-hierarchical. The chapters are semi-autonomous. And it's like what they're doing here in New Jersey has no bearing necessarily on what they're doing in Tennessee or California, anything like that. But that being said, Black Lives Matter has come out to criticize police violence against poor whites. They've done that.
Yes, they have.
Right?
I definitely have.
Yeah, I mean, if they're coming out and saying that,
Daniel,
like
Daniel Shaver out of Utah.
It's
not Utah,
like misinformation is a part of those tools. Like for the fans of Revolution Radio, know that I talk about conspiracy theories, white supremacy, the tools of white supremacy. That is a conspiracy theory, right? So about fear mongering, dualism, apocalypticism, this terrifying, horrifying fear of the other. These are all the same conspiracy theory tropes that demagogues have been using in this for literally hundreds of years. I mean, and this is why it's frustrating for me.
Yeah, but let me correct myself. I said Daniel Shaver.
I was just
hold on, Brian. Hold on. I got to correct myself right quick because I said Daniel Shaver out of Utah. I meant to say he was shot and killed by cops in Mesa, Arizona. They had him on his hands and knees. This is a white guy. Had him on his hands and knees. He was begging for his life in the hotel lobby, and they shot him.
Yeah, that was about 2 years ago, right?
That goes back to 2016. That was about 4 years ago. I'm sorry, Brian, but go on.
I actually hit screen share, but it was kind of something that reminds me of, before you open your mouth about what Black Lives Matter is saying. There's a meme out there, and I was pulling it up, but it's a picture of a guy on a couch with his dog, and it says Black people should be allowed to protest things. It says it's exactly when, where, and how Black people should be allowed to protest things by Whitey McSports fan. So it's a reflection, I think, of what white people look like when they try to explain what others should be protesting. So, keep it in mind. That's what you look like, white dude. That's what you look like when you're talking, about what Black people should be doing when they protest police murder.
But the people that we have the problem with the most in that regard are, your more right wing folks, and especially that's why we're here today, because the template of everything that they're talking about, the conservatives, the Laura Ingrams and all that, their template is going to be what you see in American Renaissance. That is not hyperbole, and I'll explain why right now.
Yeah, absolutely right, Daryle. Absolutely. Anyone who wants a window into what really mainstream conservatism is going to look like in 2 or 3 years out, go to the American Renaissance Conference and you'll find out. I mean, it was amazing to hear so many people, Daryle, kind of outraged and shocked that a demagogue like Donald Trump could have a successful Republican primary campaign, let alone win the presidency. When, we saw exactly what was going on in Montgomery Bell State Park about 8 years ago and saw the groundwork for that very movement being laid. So it's not, if you go to these things, you will see the front lines of the quote unquote intellectual development of white supremacy within the confines of the political sphere, because that's what makes American Renaissance different, than your garden variety neo-Nazi hate group, is that these guys wear business suits and will go around and lobby politicians and get things passed. They are not your garden variety. Well, they will. I've seen them, of course, give a Heil Hitler salute here and there as well when they get intoxicated, but they are not your garden variety neo-Nazis in the woods, right? Just getting together and drinking and talking about the master race. They're actually implementing those policies, making these rallies happen. They are the cutting edge, so to speak, of white supremacy in policy in America.
Right. And here's the important thing to remember about American Renaissance. One of about the conference in particular, we did some damage to them when we kicked them out of Washington, D.C. and sent them to Tennessee. And I got to explain the history. I'm going to be brief on that one. See, American Renaissance was a way to the conferences and the whole effort. It's a publication. It's a whole effort to basically keep those ideas in the mainstream of politics. So they were based in Jared Taylor, who is the publisher of American Renaissance, lives in Oakton, Virginia. That's the DC area. And when I went to that conference in 2000, I got this newsletter. And yes, I went to that conference. I wasn't supposed to go to that conference, but I pretended I was I guess the ride for a news crew from a public access station in New Jersey. Now, the public access show was actually mine. If you watch All Right, Age of Rage, you can see segments of those interviews. I mean, you can see David Duke. Yes, he was there. David Duke was at this conference. I met a guy named Chris Temple who was, I guess he called himself an economist. He was basically a white supremacist. He got busted on some fraud charges, and he sat in jail for a while. Mary Kay Letourneau, the one who raped the 13-year-old boy and then and went to jail, had his kid, and they got married and all that. Her father was there. John Schmidt. He was a dirty guy back in the day. And he was known for his old white supremacist nonsense. He was there. So, and this was in 2000. But I can tell you, I'm going to be quick. I got to read this right quick so people can understand exactly what American Renaissance is. This is kind of sort of their manifesto. It says, diversity has failed. Why are race relations still such a problem? In the 1960s, during the Civil Rights era, Americans tried to build a nation in which race would no longer matter and people of all backgrounds would live together in harmony. It is now clear that the assumptions of the civil rights movement were wrong. Race matters. It is part of human biology. Each of us is conscious of race almost all the time and for good reason. A neighborhood or school that is overwhelmingly black is different in countless ways from one that is white or Hispanic or Vietnamese. These differences are very important and explain why most people want to marry, live, and go to school with other of their own race. This is natural, normal, and healthy. It is also clear that people of different races have, on average, different levels of intelligence. Affirmative action and remedial education cannot make us all the same. Policies based on the assumption that race can be made not to matter have failed. New policies must recognize the importance of race and racial identity. Now, they also go on to say if massive non-white immigration continues, whites will become a minority in the United States, that old canard. So whites have refused to live in those parts of the country where blacks or Hispanics are the majority. Why once we turn more parts of American into places where we would not want to live. We must not leave our grandchildren to a third world nation in a third world with a third world population. Unless the European American majority defends its legitimate interests, Western civilizations will slowly fade from this continent. American Renaissance speaks for the majority and for the culture the majority alone will cherish and preserve. Now, that was in 2000.
Sound familiar? I mean,
sounds a lot.
Can I say like Trump is a third world president and these are the goofs that elect him?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I just have to say this. Like this is the thing that frustrates me, right? Like, and then like this is part of the myth, right? That in the 1960s, a magic wand was waved, and every of American culture, every American institution was just trying to force integration on everyone, as if there wasn't like resistance all throughout this, school districts being dissolved, issues with busing, entire like municipalities like falling apart due to just resistance towards education. I mean, George Wallace, like in this, like when just reading that, it is so ahistorical, it is insulting, and it is offensive, and it's like they prey on the most ignorant people. Like, I'm sorry, it just as an educator, like I teach kids, it infuriates me that it's not just a lack of thought.
No,
it's a rejection
it's not,
of it.
and I'll tell you this, and we haven't maybe even injected, and I will say that they are, Christian, your analysis is terrific because they're predators, they're preying on stupid people. They're also preying a lot on mentally ill people. And Daryle, I know you've seen this with a lot of Nazis, a lot of these guys. Listen, it doesn't make them good, and I'm not making an excuse for them. I'm not. But they specifically target people with mental illness who are prone to, maybe getting agitated a little easier and driven to these extreme acts. I mean,
but here's where it gets ugly. I don't mean to interrupt. Here's where it gets ugly. Remember that when he wrote that, when I got that, Jared Taylor was just getting out of the mainstream. People were starting to recognize just how bad American Renaissance and the Council of Conservative Citizens were. But for a good long while, for a good 10 years, Jared Taylor and company were mainstream, especially in New York, where the local talk radio stations were promoting his first book, Paved with Good Intentions. Now, this book also dealt with, this was coming out around the time of the bell curve and all of that. And it was his thing was getting in there even amongst the learned. You know, there was when I go to American Renaissance conferences, I see a lot of academics, a lot of college professors. That's who's that was who's making them. And remember,
these are the manipulators.
Yeah,
again,
these are the manipulators. These conferences were on C-SPAN.
Yes, and it's really ironic that they try to put the veneer of academia over the white supremacist, robe, basically, if you will, their racism with academia, where you would expect there to be a little bit of intellectual honesty if they were really academics, right? They will bring in these, professors from Europe who there's always one or two every year, some professor from Europe who's been discredited for plagiarizing or various shades of academic dishonesty. This year, the speaker is Professor Edward Dutton from the UK. He's being flown over as one of the speakers at this year's American Renaissance Conference, who had some trouble with plagiarizing a paper that he wrote. One of the things they like to write about year after year is that different races have intrinsically different levels of intelligence. And because I guess there was no actual data to support that, he fabricated data and had it published to show that Finnish conscripts have a better intelligence than the rest of us in the world. But the bathing or the robing of their white supremacist views in academia would kind of make the common person think, well, okay, there must be something to this. But if you actually peel back the robe a bit and look at the papers they've written and the company they keep, these people are massive outliers in the realm of academia, but they keep being brought back every year. And one thing about George Floyd I saw actually yesterday is that the European Union actually took seriously this issue of police brutality against minorities and did an EU-wide study. And so they looked basically at how American policing had exported this sort of racist bias in stops and detentions and brutality, excessive force, to Europe. And so the report was pretty damning. In pretty much all parts of Europe, there was a statistically significant excess of stops and detentions by police against ethnic minority groups. So there's no reason to bring in these European professors. We have created this environment and exported it abroad. There's nothing exotic about these professors. They fly in, except maybe a little bit of an accent to make you feel like maybe you were in a little bit of a highbrow crowd.
Yeah, and we should point out that the American Renaissance Conference is known for bringing in people from overseas, bringing in they tried to bring in Nick Griffin one year, but that was the year that we shut it down, and I'll get to that in a minute. But one time we were there and they brought in folks from South Africa that want to start a civil war down there. I mean, that's the kind of people that they're bringing in from overseas. There was another guy that was supposed to be at the American Renaissance Conference last year, but of course it got shut down because of the pandemic. He was a member of parliament in I guess it was Belgium or somewhere around there. I can't recall. I got to look at it again. But he was facing hate crimes charges, and he was a member of parliament, and he was coming here. That's the kind of people that we're dealing with. This year, so far, there was actually, incidentally, they were supposed to have the conference last weekend. They were supposed to have the makeup conference last weekend, but they decided to push it up to, once again, November 12th to the 14th. And run down the list. They don't have a lot of the speakers that they are officially going to have, but like we said, Edward Dutton is going to be one of those that are going to be that is among the speakers. They have a former GOP operative. This is what they say: former GOP operative and Taki magazine columnist David Cole. David Cole is a guy who back in the day was a Holocaust denier. And what makes that so special about him is that he's Jewish.
Yep.
And he gave that up, but he's just been a darling of the far right ever since, regardless. So he's going to be one of the speakers at American Renaissance. And another character who a lot of people are familiar with, and they refer to him as political journalist and host of the Red Elephants video channel, Vincent James. Real full name is Vincent James Fox. And he is considered an online propaganda for the Rise Above movement. A lot of that fighting that you saw in Charlottesville came from them. A lot of people in the Rise Above movement are now either sitting in jail or have fled the country because they are that terroristic. Vincent James Fox was their propagandist. And if you want to see how bad he was, all you got to remember is that he is now affiliating himself with the Groyper movement, the whole thing that Nick Fuentes put together, the Hispanic white supremacists. And he was at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, he says he wasn't in the Capitol, but people keep saying that his phone was pinged inside the Capitol. So it remains to be seen whether or not he's going to get his comeuppance for that. But besides that, he's going to be speaking at the American Renaissance Conference this November. And these are the reasons why we really want to try to get people to pay close attention to what this conference is about. This conference, like I said, originally they used to have these conferences all the time in Washington, D.C. But we started sounding the alarm. We actually got a prosecutor from upstate New York fired because he attended the conference. That happened in 2008. In 2010, in 2010, they tried to have a conference, and we just said, because they used to have them biannually around that time. So in 2010, they tried to have the conference, and we just went buck wild trying to shut them down. Will, you're in Nashville, correct?
That's right. Okay. Middle Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we shut it down. They got chased out of four. They got chased out of 4 hotels, so they had to cancel for that year. And we was like, "Oh shit, we sunk that battleship." So
but little did you know that Jared Taylor earlier that year had attended in 2010 a Council of Conservative Citizens meeting in Nashville and learned all about our beautiful bucolic state parks.
But he didn't.
It's like they served it up to him.
But they didn't give him the state park yet.
Not yet.
He did. Right. He went to Charlotte, North Carolina, to try to hold another conference, and we did the same crap to him again. And that was when he went to Tennessee in 2012, and they've been doing it, and they've been down there ever since. Now, side note, when we shut down the conference in 2010, they had a speaker named David Yeagley, an Italian guy that tried to pass himself off as a Native American, and he sued me for trying to for shutting down the conference, messing up his day. And we didn't care what they did, so we just ignored it. And he got a default judgment in Oklahoma, and we were just like, fine, now bring the shit up to Pennsylvania where I live. Just try to enforce that that judgment. He never did. A month after he got that judgment, he died.
Oh wow.
So I haven't worried about that. But that's the game. But that's the game they played. We knew it was a game. They got a little bit of mileage off of saying, "Hey, we beat the establishment." You want to do establishment number 1, but number 2, no, you didn't. So, but that's the kind of thing we're dealing with. So over the past 8 years or so, we've been having they've been having a conference down in Tennessee, and we started off by having small crowds coming up to oppose them. We've had our own separate conferences to try to teach people what's going on. It wasn't until after Trump got elected that people said, okay, this is a problem. And that's where the footage from Alt-Right Age of Rage came from. That was when we got about 150 people to come out and say, no, we cannot have this. And in 2018, 2019, things changed, and that's where I wanted to bring Will in to talk about what it is that the state of Tennessee all of a sudden started to do.
Oh yeah, so I mean, originally we were able to, because the conference is in a huge park, but they have the conference part of the conference, the speakers and the dinners and the cavorting in the Montgomery Bell Inn, the Park Inn, which is a kind of a hotel, restaurant, and meeting facility, which overlooks a lake. It's very, very gorgeous. Now, I will say my one foray into maritime law that I never thought I would experience was with certain protesters. One of them, Beth Foster, who was here last week, who ended up on a boat with some other anti-racist protesters trying to inform park goers about the racist meeting going on in the park.
That was another conference, by the way, that happened in the park.
That's right. I mean, and so we used to get very close. We could actually use the public facilities. They have a lunch counter in there, which I think is really offensive because it got to the point where the state park rangers would not allow anti-racist protesters to go to the lunch counter, even if they were just there to have lunch, right? I mean, typically these conferences are in the summer, and if you know anything about Southern heat and humidity in the middle of June, July, I mean, you got to.
Am I hearing you correctly in the dumb fuck state of Tennessee? Not that the people of Tennessee are dumb fucks, but clearly the people that run Tennessee are. That they were prohibiting certain people from eating at a lunch counter.
Yeah, it sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? I mean, that's correct. So
little bit, just something I noticed. I'm just
right.
I will stress, however, that the important thing to remember is that they weren't keeping the park venue. They weren't keeping the establishment away from just activists. They were keeping it away from everybody that wanted to enjoy the park. That
Absolutely.
means those that pay taxes in that park, those families that were coming to enjoy the park, they weren't allowed to go in there because they were in there.
Yeah,
and in years past, they were able
that's
to.
Right. As time has gone on, the park becomes a militarized zone. So, if you happen to be a family there just for the weekend, I'm really sorry, but the response from law enforcement is quite extreme in making sure that the attendees of the conference get to the hotel safely and that they're in their area and are comfortable. And then as far as everyone who is speaking out against the conference attendees, the best you can do is be in a little free speech cage. And so
did that before.
And so we had the Antifa Navy out there one year that had a banner that they unfurled. I believe the banner, I mean, it was a good Southern values. It said God, I think it says God condemns white supremacy.
Yeah, we've seen the footage. I believe we've played the footage before.
We played the footage before. I can put it up on standby if anybody wants to see it. But what we do have on standby for I want to give you 30 seconds of it.
Right, we're going to talk about the Antifa Navy so much. We really should come up with some kind of anthem, or I was in the United States.
Anchors away, yeah.
Anchors away. I mean, Antifa away.
And I also should point out that American Renaissance has been I feel so comfortable. White supremacists feel so comfortable at holding conferences there that now there's a second conference that goes there. The Council of Conservative Citizens themselves held for 2 years held a conference at the same park now. Now they're doing regular doing regular events there. Now the video that I'm going to show is from 2018, the year after the video that started off this show. It's Beth being hassled. She was hassled by the police, and she was telling her story to reporters about what happened when she went up to the gate that was not there.
Anti-racist activists that the state.
Yeah, that's it.
These are the enemies, not the Nazis and the white supremacists who are in our buildings, using our public restrooms and eating at our public restaurant, plotting genocide. They're not the enemies. We are the anti-racist protesters.
We get your name, ma'am?
My name is Beth Foster. I'm the co-director at the Mercy Junction Justice and Peace Center in Chattanooga.
Okay. Thank you.
That's how angry people were. It wasn't just her.
Yeah. So, I mean, because in the 6 years previous, the public was allowed to go in, use the bathroom, eat at the lunch counter. I mean, as you can imagine, there are no people of color in the Ameren crowd, at least that I've ever seen. Perhaps there are, but I've never seen them. So the image is pretty bad, Brian. We have anti-racist people who are all races, who were going to go try to have a veggie burger or whatever. No, just hamburger. There's no veggie burgers at the park inn, but just to have a lemonade for that matter. And they say, no, you guys can't sit here. This is for the group. Even though they have their own provisions, they have their own little room, their conference room where they have, food and drink. We're afraid for, I guess, your safety, someone's safety, that you guys can't be here. Right now, of course, look, if somebody punches somebody, you can enforce the criminal law. There's plenty of cops there, including the State Department of Correction. They bring a big prison bus, so they're prepared. If a brawl breaks loose, they're prepared to deal with it. And I tell you, the really scary part is using the prison guards for crowd control, because those prison guards are not trained in how to deal with free people, let alone First Amendment activities. And the escalation from 2017 to 2018 to 2019 was really extreme, and really I think only a reasonable person could conclude was there to discourage speaking out against the racist conference. And I hear a lot of people say, well, why not just ignore them? Right? I mean, why go out there, risk being arrested, getting in the hot, yelling at Nazis, running your blood pressure up? They're out in the woods, they're 45 minutes out of Nashville. Don't worry about what they're doing. But I think that myth was dispelled completely by Richard Spencer's clip from a few years back, where he says, look, we're right here in this room planning a rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's going to be wild. You could say it may be traumatic for the left. Yeah, it sure was.
Yeah, that's why you can't ignore them. These are the people that want you to ignore them. Go on. I'm sorry, Brian.
No, it's okay. I wanted, because you've got all the degrees, and I understand you're an attorney as well. What is the legal basis that they're getting away with this? I'm sure you've fought them and done some. Can you get into a little bit of the legal wrangling that's gone? Because honestly, your First Amendment rights are being restricted. So I don't understand what the justification is. Maybe you can explain.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, this year, the Parks Department proposed a whole new set of rules governing only certain parks in the state. Typically, that's the parks that the racist groups like to use. That were very, very restrictive. That said, no First Amendment activities whatsoever. Anywhere near a hotel, a park hotel. They were saying that's off limits. I mean, these are things that are just absolutely contrary to over 100 years of First Amendment jurisprudence.
No First Amendment activities, so I could write a local park ordinance that overrides the United States Constitution.
That's their position, right?
Yeah, that's illegal. Where's the ACLU?
Yeah, right.
Where's the ACLU? I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't want to gun.
So unfortunately, the ACLU of Tennessee was not present at the hearing where these rules were being discussed. We still have a quasi democracy here, so we before a rule is published, if it's not an emergency rule, it has to go through notice and public comment. And so, unfortunately, the ACLU of Tennessee was not present for the notice and comment period. And it's great because by law, the Parks Department or any state agency, same with any federal agency for that matter, has to take into consideration all the public comments that they receive in good faith and respond to them and say, well, this is why we considered this, but we still think it's a good rule because X, Y, Z. And I mean, when you read these new rules, it's just like, oh, they don't want anyone to confront, even in a lawful way, the Nazis or the white supremacists. So yeah, anywhere close to a hotel, they say that's not a First Amendment area because that's used for recreation. The sidewalks around it are not. I mean, even though by law, by Supreme Court precedent, parks and sidewalks have been designated as traditional public forums for a long, long time, for which any restriction on speech has to meet a very high justification by law. There were a lot of anti-racist activists who actually spoke at the hearing on these new rules, at the rulemaking hearing. Daryle, I'm pretty sure, was there as well. And so One People's Project was really influential in helping us to get the word out about this hearing. So it wasn't the ACLU that was there for us. It was a kind of loose assembly of people who were concerned about their parks being taken over not only by Nazis, but then later by the police state supporting, or at least giving the impression of supporting the Nazis. So it's sort of a double whammy. A friend of mine that I do a lot of work with is just really boiled over the lunch counter thing, because, you know, we have monuments in downtown Nashville to the people who sat in at lunch counters. And now we're saying, no, in 2021, this lunch counter is only for them. The way they try to get around it, Brian, is they say they reserve the entire building.
Yeah.
So, and that's what they've done in November. In November, there's less, you know, I can see the rationale for doing it. You know, theoretically, not them, I'm sure they won't take the COVID vaccine, but theoretically more people will be vaccinated by them, that they'll be able to ride off their coattails. And there's just not as much activity out there in November. So they just booked the whole conference center, the whole hotel. But why they can just suddenly close the restaurant, you know, is weird as well. And they have nice indoor restrooms out there. You know, outside, you would be lucky to find a porta potty. In fact, the cops arrested a young lady a few years back. You'll remember, Daryle, who had a medical issue about having to go to the bathroom, and it's a huge park. Yeah. And they arrested her for, you know, going into the woods to urinate. It would not let her into the park, the actual facilities, to use the restroom, or into the water to, you know, whatever. So
this is why we're doing this show. We really want people to turn out for the next one in November. We want you to
do it while it's legal, right? Do it while you still have a constitutional right.
While you still have a constitutional public park to do so. Also, what we want people to do is start making some noise between now and then. Now, so we could probably even just get it shut down regardless. If they see, the biggest thing that has caused them, that has made it able for them to do all of this, is basically because they just haven't had the opposition that will freak them the hell out enough to say, okay, we crossed the line.
Right, and a hotel can choose. Like, you know, when they were in North Carolina and they were in Northern Virginia, they would have these events at hotels. And as a private business, the hotel can say, we don't want anything to do with that.
Right.
The state of Tennessee does kind of have to take all comers, right? But they don't have to do so in a discriminatory fashion. I mean, they've gone a little bit beyond just saying, we really regret that we have to have these nasty people in here.
Yeah.
It's crossed from that.
It sounds like they've made a nice, comfortable home for them.
They did. For them and other groups. Yeah. For them and other groups.
They've told us, there were many during the bucolic days. We were the halcyon days of the bucolic park. We would be able to have we would have a little amplified speaker, you know, and some cupcakes, and we would have, you know, 10 or 12 speakers throughout the day, and kids playing around under a pavilion. They say, no, we don't even want you in the same park with these people.
So now this comes. So now, if this is the game that they're going to play, and bear in mind, we've met not full-on NSM, National Socialist Movement members at this thing. We don't need to tell you how bad the conference is. We've covered that. But now it's coming to the point where we do have to say, if the folks that organized Charlottesville organized there, if a guy who participated in January 6th is being invited as a speaker,
as a speaker, not just as an attendee, but as being put on the dais as a speaker.
This is one of those things that you just can't ignore anymore. So one of the things that we have a link to a Facebook page that we're going to put up right now, Leah. That's to a Facebook page if you want to know more about how you can get involved. We are going to really just ratchet it up. So if you have anything that if you want to be involved, feel free to hit us up at this Facebook page, because you'll not just talk to me, you're not just talk to Will, you're basically going to be dealing with the Tennessee Anti-Racist Network, TARN.
Yeah.
And
good
you're
folks.
also going to be dealing with the legendary anti-racist International Anti-Fascist Coalition, also known as AFOC. So I mean, that's us. It's me, Beth Foster. Some folks folks out of Knoxville, folks out of Austin, Texas. We're all concerned about all of this. Folks out of Portland, and we're trying to get people to just come out and speak out, even if you cannot make it. We got 6 months to make a lot of noise about the fact that this conference is happening, and it's been happening unabated for 9 years. And the only thing and the only changes that have been made, the only thing that has happened is that the state of Tennessee is trying to push back on those that are angry about what they're doing there.
Never mind the terrorism that they have caused and they have wrought on the rest of the world from what's going on in the conference. We have no qualms about their speech, but about everyone outside who's saying we don't want this hate in our state. Those are the bad guys, like the clip that you showed with Beth, who was just so furious at the outsized law enforcement presence there. It's not right. It's not right. And Warren is absolutely right that white supremacy is in overdrive right now. They seem to be kind of regrouping, and I fully expect that the post-Trump regrouping will begin at the American Renaissance Conference in Burns, Tennessee in November. And we have all kinds of people who come in. We have, it's the South, right? So, I mean, we can't ignore our religious brothers and sisters, right? Who come in and with a whole different perspective than kind of those of us kind of a more materialist persuasion and they have a religious burning that causes them to be there to stand up for equality. And it's a great crowd. It's a great crowd. It's a very safe crowd if it weren't for law enforcement.
I don't understand if these are obviously violent people. They have violent intentions and have been linked to violence before. The argument that the state used to justify bringing these people in, because I guarantee if it was, like a new Black Panther Party or Black Hebrew Israelites talking about the destruction of white America, the Tennessee police wouldn't be there supporting them in the same way.
No.
So I mean, I don't understand like what justification are they using to allow obviously violent people to take over this park? I'm not surprised, but I just I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean they and I think by law they would still have to extend, allow them to reserve the facilities or whatever, but they don't have to let them reserve the entire facilities to the exclusion of everyone else, right? Yeah, I mean that's part of it too, is mutual use of the park. I think predominantly because by law, in order for a threat to be such that you can shut down speech before it happens, the speech has to present a serious risk of imminent incitement to unlawful conduct, kind of like standing up there at the podium saying, let's go to the Capitol right now and mess things up. That would be, that could potentially be seen as imminent incitement to unlawful conduct. But, planning something a few months in advance of a rally in Charlottesville, North Carolina, Virginia, does not meet the constitutional level of being able to shut down preemptively, which is probably a good thing, because you don't want the government to be so involved in what the speech is going to be that they have the authority to stop the speech before it happens. I mean, much of this law came about because of the civil rights era, where mayors would issue these injunctions and local courts would issue injunctions against marches and rallies in the South. So, I, as a legal scholar, kind of have the unpopular opinion that I kind of get what the state's going at, to say we can't shut them out completely, and have to give them some kind of platform. But my problem is they do not have to give them a red carpet.
Yeah. Well, I think I will say, like, on the topic of free speech, I think we're giving deference to the bourgeois notion of free speech as compared to what free speech might actually be.
That's also fair. Absolutely.
I think that the idea and the principles behind freedom of speech are good and are beneficial to a society, because we need to discuss problems and have that kind of open discussion. But what we have here is not really free speech, because if you have a lot of money, you can say whatever you want, but a poor person will lose their job and all kinds of horrible things. So
absolutely,
we don't really, in a capitalist system, and I hate to get into the we need communism to fix everything conversation. No, that's not what I'm getting at, but I'm just saying it's
next
really
week.
Right. When we prioritize property or capital as the dominating factor in a society, speech is not going to be free no matter what you do, because you can get away with it if you're rich. You can get away with inciting a riot in the Capitol and having people, and the only people that will face consequences is some poor mentally ill dude that thought dressing up like a buffalo and going into the Senate was a good idea. That dude needs to be in a hospital around people that are making him comfortable and can have a good time with him. Because you know what? I don't care about that dude. I'd like to hang out with him because he seems like a lot of fucking fun. But Donald Trump,
you should Google what his lawyer said about him.
But Donald Trump, who manipulated
right?
But Donald Trump, who manipulated this guy, who used his power and his influence to put that guy in that position, walked away scot-free, and is still thinking he's going to be the next president of the United States.
Right, and part of the problem that we do have in this regard is that since the beginning of our sort of modern evolution of understanding of free speech, in the 40s, 50s, 60s mostly, is that the heuristic that was used a lot in the courts is the marketplace of ideas notion of free speech. And so that implies that there's a marketability and a value of certain speech over other speech, and that there is a potentially a finite resource of speech, which I think is not true, because in order for there to be a marketplace, there has to be a discrete, limited resource. So I think the sort of the marketplace of ideas paradigm, as far as analyzing free speech issues, is not what I prefer. I kind of take the free speech as a sort of social safety valve, where if we don't allow speech to happen, then the consequences would be much more severe and dire as a society.
Yeah. Now, we're coming in. We're about 5 minutes before the end of the show, so I do want to point out to make something clear too, in regards to what we have planned for now, November. That is also. Let me make sure I got the date right. It's World Kindness Day on that weekend. So one of the things that, of course, one of the things that we really want to do is more or less celebrate ourselves and celebrate the fact that we are out there fighting this hatred and bigotry. And one of the reasons why my organization is called One People's Project is because the counter demonstration to the white supremacist rally that started One People's Project was called the One People's Rally, because we all came together as one people to take that nonsense on. So there is going to be a festive affair whenever we have our event, our rally at Montgomery Bell Park Inn. That's at the Montgomery Bell State Park in Burns, Tennessee. I want to remind people that that's where we're going to be, the Montgomery Bell State Park. And we're going to have, hopefully we can get some musicians to perform there. It's the park is, campground, so you can probably pitch a tent. I'll be very careful with that, considering how hot the police are going to be on us. So you could be sleeping in your tent. The next thing you know, there's a police raid in your campground. So
and we always have a safe space for people that are who want to stay outside the park but nearby. So that's
right. And there are hotels. There are hotels in the area. I usually hit the hotels when I'm there. The one thing that you got to be concerned about is that they're using the hotels too. I mean, we haven't had any drama yet. Huh?
Who did you share breakfast with about 2.5 years ago?
The guy who got disowned by his family for going to Charlottesville.
the crying guy, right?
Yeah, not the crying guy. Oh God, if it was him, no, I'm sorry, Lord, for using your name in vain. I don't do that. But no, no, it wasn't him. It was a guy. I keep saying his last name is Neff, N-E-F-F. And
okay, all right. I get those two confused.
But you're thinking of Chris Cantwell. If
that's
he
right.
There would have been some fighting.
Oh, Cantwell, the ball. Yeah.
I don't think he ever went to an American Renaissance Conference, and now he can't go to this one because he's in jail. Right. So So yeah, that's something in the interest of security. You're going to have to be mindful of the fact that if you stay at a hotel in that area, in that immediate area, you're liable to be next door to one of the attendees. So and also, who knows? You might even be able to get a hotel a room in the Montgomery Bell Park Inn. It's possible, but
They say American Renaissance says they've booked the entire hotel.
yeah, but they usually release the rooms like maybe a week or so beforehand if they aren't all sold or something like that. So you can do that. But I wouldn't recommend that because then the drama will really kick up a notch. So, and they usually tell you around this time that you can't bring firearms into the park or some nonsense like that. I will tell you, however, that we are going to be working with local churches and local organizations in the area to help accommodate people who are going to be coming in. So if you are interested in coming down, please just hit us up via that Facebook page. We also want to make sure that that certain media outlets and organizations know that this is going on. All right. So we got to know what organizations, not just in Tennessee, in your neck of the woods, in Alabama, in New York City, in South Dakota, wherever you live, in Georgia, wherever you are, give me the names of your organizations and of your media outlets. Send it to, and Leah can post this my email up, dlj@onepeoplesproject.com. That is my email address. Send me, and send me the name of an organization or media outlet that you want us to get in touch with about this. And you got to give us the contact information. You got to give me the contact information so I can do so, obviously. And I will make sure that they get a press release that I'll be writing up this week, so that they can know, and we can start corresponding with them and start coordinating with them, so that when the day comes, we're going to be able to have a really nice event. We're going to have a really nice event, and we're going to be able to show people that the past 4 years was an anomaly. I can't even say the word. Is not going to happen again. All right. And it's all going to be up to us. Like I said, the only reason why they get into these positions is because we allow them to do so. So, all right, we're coming up on a minute. I just want to say right quick that I'm still going to be in this office because at about 11 o'clock, I'm going to be on Fox Soul.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So I'm going to be wearing a different shirt. I don't want to wear this Torch Antifa shirt. I love Torch Antifa, but I want to be presentable as I discuss cancel culture with the crew. So I'm going to be dolling myself up in a minute. So if you guys can find Fox Soul they're on YouTube, so you can check that out. You can just go to foxsoul.com, I believe it is, and you can see the show. But
what's the name of the show? What's the name of the show you're going to be on?
Oh, thank you. The Tammy Mack Show. The Tammy Mack Show.
Cool,
yes.
Man.
Yes, and it comes on at 11 o'clock EST. So basically, that's just 2 hours from now. So, well, glad you were here today.
It's been a pleasure. Absolutely.
Glad you were here today. I'm glad you was able to make it. And we will do this again. We're going to be having guest hosts in the next couple over the summer. So when one of us want to take a break, Brian, how do you feel about taking a break for the next weekend?
I feel like my whole life is a break, man. I'm just enjoying one big long break, so that's going to be no difference. I'm sitting over here rolling up some cones for the week. I'm gonna hang out, gonna go out in the woods, cut down some trees, and so I'm good with a break, because I probably won't notice the difference between that and my work.
Christian, we're gonna have a break.
All right. Actually be in New Orleans next week, so I was ready to broadcast live from the French Quarter, but I guess
now you make me want to do it. No,
I could have done it. I'm going to be staying right across the water. My buddy's a lawyer out there.
Is it Christian Perez? I'm
what happens when I do an audible like this? Now I want to do a show.
That's what I would sound like.
We got all summer. There's going to be a lot more places. We're going to be live in other locations in all summer, but I feel I need to take a break because there's something I have to do on next Tuesday.
Word.
So you know, it's all
Might
good.
take off any
But
more.
Brian, do you have things happening tomorrow?
Of course.
What's going on?
Tomorrow, yeah, actually, Christian and I are going to do a show. I'll let Christian do that, and then I'll plug the event. So, Christian, why don't you tell him about what we're going to do tomorrow? Because I don't know.
So tomorrow night, Brian and I were having a chat, and we want to talk about Joe Biden and how he's been doing so far. It's something we addressed a couple weeks back, and it's something we want back and talk about. We're not going to beat up Joe Biden 100%. We want to do a fair look at Joe Biden, right? Oh, there's going to be doing it. Well, okay, let me take that back. It'd be some but that's not the entire show. We want to be fair, right? Democrats and Republicans are both frustrating, but they're not the same, right? I am of the opinion that some Democrats are not as terrible as we make them out to be. But we'll, see what you have to say tomorrow. Come yell at me, folks. Trash me in the comment section. Let me know what you have to say.
I'm saving it up right now, but it's going to be a good show. And I love the shows where just me and Christian get together because we put a lot together. A lot goes into NJR Live, and it's nice to kick back with your buddy. And our audience love the shows where we kind of recap the stuff. So we'll talk about Biden and all that, but we'll also kind of go over everything that's been going on. I mean, with the Israel-Palestine issue and all that kind of stuff. And don't forget, June 22nd, Edison, we talk about events, getting out of the house and stuff, the coffee house in Edison. We're going to do a big 2-hour show with Revolution Radio, NJR Live, IDAVOX. We got comrades coming out. We're going to have panels and prizes and all kinds of stuff. I can't wait. I'm not wearing a mask no more. I'm fully vaccinated. I'm not an anti-masker, but maybe I am, but I'm walking around without a mask and I'm shaking hands again.
Friday,
it really feels good.
Yeah, Friday, the mask law is lifted. It depends. Yeah, so we're going to have another New Jersey Revolution. That's all.
Oh, look at you, big mug.
So, all right, y'all. Will, thank you again. Brian, Christian,
awesome to be here.
I'll see you in 2 weeks, even though it should be next week since you told me in New Orleans, but I already did the audible. So
no, I'm headed to NOLA right now. So
all right,
all right, y'all. So I want to thank everybody for watching the show or listening, as the case may be for some folks. And like I said, we're not going to be here next week. We'll be here the week after, and we're probably going to have a lot to talk about because protest season has begun. The summer has begun, and we're going to have a lot to talk about. And we are going to talk about any updates regarding American Renaissance and what people are saying who are going to be involved. We're probably going to get some folks who are also want to talk about American Renaissance on the show. I'm looking forward to the summer. So I hope you are too. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care, y'all. Peace.
Thrown against the car, handcuffed, and that's what happened last night.
The police kicked in the door, shot him twice in the chest, and he died.
Before you knew it, we had 500 families. We had over 100 volunteers calling us. We were on the phone constantly.
I can't get it. And I got one police department telling me they don't know who's in charge. I got another police department here. Everybody's got a gun and nobody knows who's in charge. Did anybody figure out who's in charge yet? Is there anybody in charge here? Any police officer in charge? Are you in charge? I can't find anybody in charge. That's the problem.